Okay, so for this week's video, we're going to focus on creating a lineup that will hopefully win you one of the big GPP tournaments at DraftKings. For those of you who don't know, GPP stands for Guaranteed Prize Pool, and usually for a very, very small investment, you could win a vast sum of money. For instance, in the Millionaire Maker, you could put in $20 and win $1 million for first place. However, the prizes for these GPPs are heavily weighted towards the top. So your lineup must be both unique enough to stand alone, but also strong enough to be the best total lineup of over 500,000 people sometimes. So there definitely is an art to it. So hopefully by the end of this video, we'll be there. My top quarterback for this week is going to be Josh McCown for the Browns. Now, when people think of the Browns, they don't think too highly, but neither do I, to be honest. But this week, the Browns go against the Ravens. And in week 5, Josh McCown threw for 469 yards and 3 touchdowns versus the Ravens. He has over 20 DraftKings points in 4 of his 6 starts, and he's priced at the bare minimum for a quarterback. He's not going to be very high owned. I believe if you look at the FanDuel Thursday ownership percentages, he's only owned by 5.3% of people. So, with that in mind, going against Baltimore, who has a horrendous pass defense, we should be in good shape in McCown. You can stack him with Travis Benjamin or Gary Barnidge or by himself, although in a GPP, usually you want to be stacking a quarterback and at least one of his passing options. On to the running backs. My number one running back this week is Mark Ingram. Again, you're starting to see a theme here. 5% owned on the FanDuel Thursday. The Texans have one of the worst run defenses in the league, and if you looked at the page before, Brian Hoyer is one of the quarterbacks I recommended. Now, Hoyer and especially DeAndre Hopkins are going to be extremely highly owned this week, just simply because Hoyer is dirt cheap and Hopkins is one of the best receivers in the league. But if you look at Ingram, he's got almost 100 yards, 4 catches a game. He averages 17.2 DraftKings points, and it's going to be the highest scoring game of the week according to Vegas. They're not always right, but they wouldn't be in business if they were always wrong. So I think that's a great pick. He catches a lot of passes, and if they decide to run the ball a lot, there you go. He's their number one running back also. So count him in for me on a majority of my lineups. This week, we have a tie between 2 wide receivers as my favorites for this week, Nate Washington and Martavis Bryant. Both of them are going to be the second wide receivers for 2 teams that I believe are going to have great games this weekend, Houston and Pittsburgh. Houston, like I said, Hoyer is going to be highly owned, Hopkins is going to be highly owned, but Washington's salary is $5,300 less than DeAndre Hopkins, and Martavis Bryant's salary is $3,100 less than Brown. That's a lot of extra salary room where you can stock up on other players. And again, the Saints have a terrible pass D. That game is going to be a shootout, and I'm sure Hopkins is going to get his looks, but so is Washington. So don't sleep on him. And Martavis Bryant, I don't think I even need to explain how good he is. He's averaging over 20 points. And Richard Sherman is going to be following Antonio Brown all game. So hopefully Bryant can get open a few times and make us some serious money. Another game that I think is going to end up being a shootout is the San Diego game against Jacksonville. Antonio Gates, as soon as he came back from injury, he came out of the gate hot. They're missing Keenan Allen. Stevie Johnson's not really doing it. Their run game has just been terrible. Gordon, even though they give them the ball 20 times, still can only get 30 yards with it. He's 6.3% owned. Not as big a numbers as Barnidge and Delaney Walker for the season, but we all know Antonio Gates can have a huge game. I think Jacksonville's going to try to give the ball to Yeldon a lot because San Diego's run defense is so bad, but if they can get the ball in San Diego's hands a couple times, I think Antonio Gates is the number one option this week for Rivers to throw to, and I just don't see them, San Diego, being far ahead at all. So they're going to be playing catch-up. Hopefully it goes that way, and I'm picking Gates for a lot of my lineups this week. Some honorable mentions for this week that I wasn't able to cover. I really like Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Kirk Cousins. Russell Wilson, I think, is going to have to be playing catch up against Pittsburgh, so we'll see how that goes. And obviously, Ben Roethlisberger is always a threat. Adrian Peterson is going to have a huge game, but I think he's going to be too expensive and too highly owned. Look out for Thomas Rawls. Giovanni Bernard, I know he was on my running backs page, but I think a lot of people are going to be sleeping on him. Danny Woodhead. Watch out for Sean John in San Fran. And of course, Todd Gurley is always a threat. So we'll see what happens. Good luck, grinders.